How a Romance Novel Saved the Galaxy by Ariana de Rolte. Chapter 68, Concordia 9, Mace 8.
Yes, let's,
said Mace, hiding his amusement when the reunited father and son looked at him, clearly unaware there was anyone else there. Most of Mace's squadron had gone. Once they were out, he'd fused the broken hatch door from the level above shut and come down with two of the Mandos who insisted on watching his back. His purpose was to watch Holdan Law's back until he got Obi-Wan out, which he just about succeeded in by the time Mace came down to this level. They really were quite sweet. It reminded him of the time he'd rescued Deppa from being held captive by pirates after several days. He'd had to trust the Force that she would be safe until he dealt with rescuing the civilians who came first. But when he finally got to her, they had both taken a moment for a brief hug before springing back to action.
"Master Windu!"
The boy straightened as if he were giving a report.
"Did my squad inform you there are bombs on level 20? "They did. I'd have suggested disarming them, but we've gotten what we came for. If Vizsla blows the mines, the only ones who will suffer are Death Watch. Well, once we get out of here."
"And you know Vizsla has the dark saber?"
"We suspected he did, but it's good to hear confirmation."
One of the Mandalorians relayed that info over their comms just in case one of the others hadn't already informed them.
"So everyone is out except for us?" Obi-Wan asked. "Was that the only purpose of this mission? What about Death Watch?"
There was the righteous anger Yoda had mentioned. Mace could hardly blame him, considering he'd seen the condition some of the children were in.
"Master Yaddle is probably around somewhere, but I trust her to take care of herself."
He was deeply curious where she was, but the Force gave no answer.
"The Jedi's mission is to rescue the children being held captive. The Mandalorians have their own plans for dealing with Death Watch, which the Jedi are not officially involved in."
They were already skirting a thin line with the Senate participating in the rescue, despite it being part of Plo's mission.
"If you're ready, we should go."
Both La and Obi-Wan nodded, La putting his helmet back on. Mace stuck his head out into the lift shaft through the hole in the lift and fired door. They were in luck. The lift was moving up, away from level 10.
"Move, quickly!"
The two Mandos with him were out the door and blasting away. Mace motioned La and Obi-Wan forward, Obi-Wan being held in a light hug so his father could bear him upwards. They took off, and Mace stepped out of the hole to follow, eyes focused further up to make sure the lift wasn't moving. Damn, it was heading back down. They'd have to move fast. Then a blaster bolt shot out of the center of the shaft, striking La's jetpack and making it smoke. Obi-Wan and La cried out as they began to drop. Mace pushed off using the Force, letting it guide his movements. First, he thrust out one hand towards the holes he'd cut in the doors a level above them. The Death Watch member, who was shooting a second time, had the barrel of their blaster thrust upwards, the shot hitting uselessly against the lift walls. Mace collided as gently as possible with La and Kenobi. He used the Force to rip the overloading jetpack off, sending it hurtling down the lift shaft with unnatural speed. He'd seen the schematics of the mine. There was water down there, which would either prevent or muffle the blast when it exploded, both of which were preferable to triggering the bombs on level 20. The lift was blocking the old mine tunnel again. Mace bounced off the lift shaft wall and redirected them all back to the door they had come out of, trying to dodge the barrage of blaster fire now coming from the level above. It seems Death Watch had given up trying to get through the hatch he'd fused. It was awkward to maneuver through the hole with a grown man in Mandalorian armor and Obi-Wan. His shoulder jarred against one melted side, sending a jolt of pain through his whole arm. They crashed to the floor, and Mace took a moment to shunt the pain into the Force. "More!" Obi-Wan scrambled off him. La was on the ground, unmoving. Mace reached out with the Force, aware he had no hope of finding a pulse through the Mandalorian armor and underarmor. It drew his attention to the fact that La's chest was moving up and down.
"He's alive, everyone. Check with the Force, please."
He placed one hand on Obi-Wan's arm, sending some reassurance through the Force. Had he just almost called the boy his Padawan? It was probably because Obi-Wan had been acting more like a Padawan than an initiate this entire time. "He hit his head when we came through the door," said Obi-Wan, tension draining out of him. That was much better than being shot.
"Let's wait a moment and see if he wakes up,"
suggested Mace. He placed himself between the lift door and Obi-Wan and La. Hopefully, it hadn't occurred to Death Watch to just use jetpacks to continue attacking them, but it had certainly occurred to Mace. His hand was on his lightsaber as he contemplated how he was getting them out of here. If La remained unconscious, Mace was going to have to carry at least himself and La with the Force.
"I'll argue with Force-assisted jumps, Obi-Wan."
It wasn't a skill initiates were taught, but there were always a few who learned it early, if only so they could have fun jumping from trees and the tops of waterfalls in the room of 1,000 fountains. A look of frustration passed over the boy's face. He sighed.
I don't know anything about it, Master Windu, I'm sorry. I only asked so I could plan our way out,
said Mace, wanting to reassure the surprisingly humble boy. Mace certainly would have tried to exaggerate having the skill to please his master at that age.
It's something you will learn as a Padawan.
Obi-Wan looked skeptical for some reason. It was clear La wasn't waking up on his own.
If you climb on my back, you can hang on while I propel us all upward. We'll need to move fast.
That was probably the reason why Death Watch hadn't shot at the 2 super commandos who went up the lift shaft first. They had flown up quickly, while La had moved slower with Obi-Wan in his arms. Help! I will! Mace was a Jedi, so he didn't jump. But it was a near thing.
Yaddle,
he said warmly. She must have come through one of the vents.
We could use the assist. I'm not sure if you heard, but this whole mine is rigged to explode.
Learned this when visiting their apps I did. Difficult to blow, they will find it without these.
She held up several thick wires in her claws.
Both Mace and Obi-Wan's mouths dropped open. Unable to talk directly to his people. Vizsla is as well,
said Yaddle, casually dropping another set of wires from her robe's
pockets.
She should have been busy. Yaddle got on Obi-Wan's back and force-jumped with him, while Mace took La. They stuck to the left side of the shaft and went fast, so Deathwatch never even saw them. They landed in the old mining tunnel, almost colliding with some of the super commandos who were coming back to help them.
Please inform the Mandalore that the mine is clear,
he asked Mir, who had been acting as a second-in-command. They could all just faintly hear the echoes of the Mandalorian chant still echoing through the mine, though surely the actual chant had stopped above ground. They headed outside. He gestured Obi-Wan nearer as they walked. He wanted to keep the boy's mind off his boar, floating unconscious next to him.
I'm not sure if anyone has been keeping you informed, Obi-Wan, but Master El-Mem has been removed from leadership of Skull Clan.
Why?
For not properly caring for the children he was entrusted with.
Obi-Wan frowned. He did take care of us. We were all well fed and trained.
That is the bare minimum we expect from our clan leaders. That he allowed bullying to develop and for the bullies to prosper, when that is improper behavior for any children, not just Jedi, was unacceptable.
I always thought he was just being fair. It was my win against Brox, said Obi-Wan.
And he's a Jedi Master, who can consult the Force about who is in the right, not just make assumptions.
That was certainly what Mace had done when he'd first heard of the issue. Last he heard, Chun was doing some intensive sessions with the mind healers to help the Council of Reassignment figure out what they were going to do with him. Unless the behavior was pathological, Mace was sure the boy could improve, but it would be a lot of work. Fortunately for Chung, the council was getting rid of the 13-year age limit.
I'll have some good news for you as well. I know you've been told we were waiving your own age limit, but the council is doing away with the age restrictions on initiates being chosen at 13. It's going to take a while to finalize, but it's happening.
Slow, the council is,
chimed in Yaddle. The council was bogged down in arguing what to do about those who had been sent away in the past 50 or so years the rule had been in place. Mace was definitely going to put forth the suggestion that they disentangle the two issues, so the stressed initiates nearing their 13th birthday in the temple could at least be told they weren't being sent away the moment they turned 13. Obi-Wan smiled.
That will be great for the rest of Skull Clan. Not for you,
asked Mace. Obi-Wan darted a look at him.
I don't think anyone's going to want a failed initiate like me, even after this reassessment everyone says is going to happen when I get back. I couldn't even pass my Vergotten.
There was a chorus of denials from all the super commandos around them. Mace smirked.
I can't speak for the Mandalorians, but I think they disagree with you. As for the Jedi, that whole event of you finding the Dragons has spread throughout the temple network. Your actions on Mandalore and here on Concordia are becoming well known, and no, not in a bad way,
he said when he saw Obi-Wan's worried look.
I think you'll find there are multiple masters who are interested in you when you get back to the temple.
Obi-Wan shook his head.
I'm too angry, Master Jin said so. Do you think I wasn't angry at Deathwatch when I had to carry out children too faint from hunger and sleep deprivation to walk on their own?
Asked Mace. Qui-Gon really was foolish. Mace had spent most of his life being angry at injustice. It didn't preclude you from being a Jedi.
Angry I was when Lord of the Bombs in the May I did, said Yaddle.
Jedi are allowed to feel anger, Obi-Wan. It's only the dark side when you let the anger use you, when you let it turn into hatred. A master's job is to temper the Padawan's emotions, not extinguish them. My master, Sizzling Mir, always said she enjoyed the challenge.
Disbelief was plain to see on Obi-Wan's face and an unspoken question. If anger didn't preclude being chosen as a Padawan, why hadn't Obi-Wan? Mace didn't think explaining his Grandmaster had treated him poorly in an attempt to poach him for his lineage was the right tact to take. Yoda was idolized by initiates and most Jedi. He could sense that to break that faith right now would cause the boy to fall apart. In the Force, Obi-Wan was a burgeoning Shatterpoint. He trusted in the true Mandalorians, in his Boar, and in Master Fei. But his trust in other adult Jedi was lacking. Oh, he trusted them to be Jedi, to do the right thing. But he didn't believe they would do anything for him. And the poor boy thought that was his fault, that he wasn't good enough no matter what he did. Mace also sensed that Fei had been correct to insist if someone didn't choose Obi-Wan soon, the Jedi would lose him. Mace couldn't sense how deep and how far in the future the Shadow Point went, but he knew instinctively that that would be a great tragedy. Mace had planned to wait a few more years to take another Padawan, considering he knighted Deppa less than a year ago. He'd need to coordinate carefully with the mind healers to deal with Obi-Wan's issues, but he was certain this was the right thing to do, even though he could also sense that Obi-Wan was going to cause him so many more headaches than Deppa ever had. It would be worth it, especially since it had the added perk of getting him out of council meetings permanently until Obi-Wan became a senior Padawan. The light from the mine entrance was spilling onto Obi-Wan's face as Mace turned to him, mindful of keeping law level.
I also enjoy a challenge. If you'll have me, I would be honored to be your master, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
He bowed his head, ignoring the low burst of chatter he could hear over the Super Commando's comms, though we noted Yaddle was grinning broadly.
Master Windu, are you sure? I don't think you could be on the council with a Padawan.
Youngest master ever on the council base is,
said Yaddle, and gave out a little giggle. Mace Pipik a groan at the descriptor. He was so recommending Deppa to the council in a few years, just so he could place the title on her instead. Considering she was training to be a consular Jedi, she would enjoy the meetings much more than he did.
But temporary position it is,
continued Yaddle.
The healers have advised me to leave the council for my health,
explained Mace. That he would joyfully do so now that the Force had suggested a greater duty was beside the point. Obi-Wan studied him carefully before bowing his head.
I would be honored to be your Padawan, Master Windu.
Mace smiled and lightly squeezed the boy's shoulder.
We'll finalize the bond once we've all seen a medic.
Obi-Wan bowed low.
Yes, Master,
he said with a shy smile. Mace definitely heard an "ah" echoing onto the helmet of Mir, the Trandoshan Super Commando next to him. They walked out into the sunlight, and Obi-Wan was surrounded by several children. Judging by the dust on all their clothes, they were probably the squad he had escaped with. A Mandalorian medic was immediately at Law's side as Mace lowered the unconscious man to the ground. Pulling his helmet off didn't reveal any obvious injuries, but it was likely the back of his head that had been hit as they went through the door. Force healing was not his specialty, but Yaddle touched the man's bound black hair and hummed.
Definitely a concussion, but the readings are improving,
said the medic, sounding confused. Looking at the man in the sunlight, Mace could see the obvious bond in the Force.
Padawan,
he called, enjoying how the boy lit up at the word.
You have a bond with your bar, yes?
Yes, Master.
Try reaching out to him.
Obi-Wan nodded and closed his eyes to concentrate.
La abruptly moved his hand, reaching out blindly.
Obi-Wan, he said. The man tried to open his eyes, but winced and shut them tightly again. Obi-Wan grabbed his hand.
I'm here. We're safe.
Joy rang through the Force. The rescue was complete, and the Mandalorians were free to take down Death Watch.